I believe that it would essentially go away. It would not.
It would come up in an IEP discussion that the student should not be released from an IEP, potentially they would not graduate because they would lose.
They're locally
to a 504, right? Is that
Or
what
if
that would be
in
covered?
this scenario.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know if it's like,
So
Call
that's
them.
why I suggested that, I would not recommend a school team to want to dismiss a student. If we knew that that was the student's history, it would certainly be an unwise thing to do, in my opinion. But of course, each group is, there are unique situations, but of course, I would always advise a parent to exercise their right to not allow the student to be dismissed. I think it would be unlikely.
You know, there are a lot of parents who don't know that.
Right.
Wait, shouldn't that be like in the computer system that the bells go off? It's like big star. Hey, this guy has verified credits. We should make sure we don't dismiss them.
It should be.
You have it, and obviously you don't necessarily.
I think there are 1,000 what if scenarios we can look at. I would if I were sitting in a team, I would not recommend that a team go with dismissal for a student, given that situation for what the student has been accumulating along the way. It would be unwise, in my opinion, to recommend that. So I would hope that the school team would not go that direction. So it should be a very rare what if.
Seems it would only happen if they didn't realize that they had a verified credit, because I'm sure like they're.
You can't get a person here anyway, so it really is hypothetical.
Okay.
So I think it would be very unlikely, but
What we do see are for these kids with dyslexia, for example, you know, they're not really getting reading instruction, they're kind of leveling along, and oftentimes you have a triennial sophomore year, and everybody agrees, okay, we're
Let's
not really
dismiss them.
benefiting from services, so we're just gonna drop the IEP. Then the kid fails the reading and writing essay all junior year. I mean, that does happen.
that does happen.
So there are a lot of considerations, but I'm trying to give a brief overview. There's a little bit more we can get onto. In the next slide, the modified standard diploma has been something that's been around for around 10 or so years. It is in the process of being phased out. Probably last year was the last year that we had any significant group of students who were graduating with that. It was available, or still is available, for students who entered 9th grade in 2013, 14, or earlier. Students who entered 9th grade in the fall of 2014, this was no longer available as a diploma option for them. So there are very few students who would be still in school earning a modified standard diploma in this cohort year and in the following year, and then will pretty much be gone. The next slide describes a little bit about this. Modified standard diploma has fewer, say a standard diploma has 22 required credits. Say for a standard diploma, a student has to have 3 laboratory sciences. This is going to be just 2. And there are no SOL exams. The standard, we call it literacy and numeracy assessments, are going to be the 8th grade reading and math SOL exams with cut scores that are a little bit lower than the standard 400. There are a variety of alternative alternates to this. One of them is the work keys math test and the work keys reading test. And I should have mentioned also with the standard diploma, there are some alternates other than alternates for earning a verified credit other than the SOL exams. That would be a whole other kind of a discussion. With this though, it's important to note that, say, 4 years of English, 3 years of math, these are not the same courses that a student would be taking for a standard diploma. These are heavily modified courses that are traditionally taught in the self-contained environment by a special education teacher, and they sometimes quite significantly are modified from the standard curriculum. For instance, the 3 math sequences are very often, they have been 1 year of Algebra 1 Part 1 taught in a self-contained environment, and the actual curriculum might really deviate significantly from true Algebra 1 Part 1. The second year would be selected topics in geometry, and by the nature of the selected topics, hitting some of the items from geometry, but definitely not the full SOL curriculum. And the third one would be personal living and finance, which is a self-contained version of the econ and personal finance. The coursework that students are taking in this diploma option is quite different from what's happening in most typical classrooms. I think that's important to note. I'm sorry.
So what's gonna happen to those students?
Okay, so
They average about
that's a very good question.
That's a lot of kids.
Well, actually, in the total number of students, it is a smaller number of students. Some of these students now will be accessing a standard diploma with credit accommodations, and other students are going to be accessing an applied studies diploma. And
So there were
Is-
39 kids in 2016. I mean, Linda,
Right.
this is the spreadsheet that you sent me. So 2.9% of our students with disabilities,
Right.
like, got the modified standard last year. So,
I think it's important to have an understanding of that based on the coursework that most of the students have been doing in this diploma program, they have not been accessing the full SOL curriculum, they've been accessing very heavily modified curriculum. In middle school, this is a cohort of students who have been in self-contained classes in middle school, accessing heavily modified instruction. Most of the students who have ended up with this type of diploma option have been getting heavy modifications and accommodations along the way, such that they are doing work that is really quite different from the full SOL curriculum. That is important to note.
because
Also-
Paul, like, if you have the VAT check, right, in your IEP.
They are usually not students who are participating in that. So they are usually not participating in that because they are participating in the state SOL assessments, but the assessment that they will be using for graduation is traditionally the 8th grade reading test and 8th grade math test, with the scores right there as the benchmark that they're going to be working to. Now, as far as determining if a student would be earning this diploma option, no one actually officially declares a student as a modified standard diploma candidate, usually until they're into high school. So
But then
people
we only
should be
have
thinking
1
about it
year
when they're in middle
left.
school.
Right, this is it, like,
It's
this is
no
the
longer,
fourth
it's
year.
no longer available, but the students who, I would say a student who would have formerly earned this diploma, the same type of student or profile of the student, they'll be earning some type of diploma right now. Some, if they are able to, get, more of a robust, instruction, they could be eligible for a standard diploma with credit accommodations. Otherwise, they will be earning an applied studies diploma. I think it's important to note, though, that the modified standard diploma sounds nice, and I think this may be controversial, but I think it's really important to note that because of the words modified standard diploma, it sounds a lot like standard diploma, but it's not representing the work of what a standard diploma really represents as an academic body of work. Applied studies diploma sounds very different. When a student graduates from high school with an advanced studies diploma, they have many doors that are available to them as options in the world. When the student graduates with a standard diploma, they have many doors available to them, maybe some fewer than in advanced studies. When a student graduates with a modified standard diploma, for higher education, they have very few doors open to them. So a student with a modified standard diploma is typically eligible to go to community college or vocational schools or other technical, where there are very few select specialty colleges where a student may be eligible to go to. However, the majority of higher education institutions, a student with a modified standard diploma would not have been going there. A modified standard diploma, in effect, does not open any more doors than an applied studies diploma would open for a student. It sounds nicer, but having the modified standard diploma no longer available does not really provide fewer opportunities post-high school to a student. And I think it's an important reality to try to embrace.
I don't know, I I disagree. I think the modified standard, while the academic rigor is very different, as far as a path forward for a student with disabilities, the modified standard is drastically different than applied studies.
It can be.
I mean, and I'm not talking about necessarily going to college or going to MIT, but the community college door is still fairly wide open with modified standard. With applied studies, not so much. I think military, you can get in the military with modified standard. Applied studies, you cannot. Typically, if you're applying for a job and they ask you if you've graduated from high school, a modified standard diploma will suffice for a lot of those less technical jobs, and applied studies will not in many instances. So I just don't want people to be, so that's my only fear, is that the modified standard, while the academic rigor is certainly much different than the other diplomas, it gave you a high school diploma that was recognized as such, and all of the benefits that go along with that, outside of significant higher education opportunities. Linda, you had.
Yeah, I just want to say, the kids I know who earned the modified standard diploma didn't really fit your description. They were kids who really were in general ed classes. I know at times they took the selected topics in, algebra 2 or whatever it is, but most of their curriculum was regular courses, and they just couldn't pass the FSLs to get that standard diploma, and this ended up being your default. So they kind of were surprised by senior year, so the parents are surprised senior year to find out the kid's not getting a real diploma. And so I'm concerned, do we know of the 39 to 50 kids who get this, how many of them are really kids who were almost there, but didn't quite succeed, as opposed to kids who really were never on the diploma path to start with?
So that's an important point to bring up, and I think that the majority of kids who have earned a modified standard diploma have not spent time in integrated core classes. There may be a few, but that is not the typical profile of the students. Students in a situation as you're describing, those are students where the credit accommodations will be helpful for some of them being able to score at least 375. Now, if there's a student who's taken an SWell exam and has scored, say, 368, and they've tried again and again and again, the credit accommodations are not going to be able to support them. I think it's also important that these are regulations that come down from the state, and that Arlington Public Schools is not the governing body that generates the regulations. We simply have to work within what's available. Now, if a student graduates with all of the diplomas, I would say, are real diplomas, because every student who leaves the school system with a diploma or with a certificate is going to be going out into the world and doing different things that he or she might, what their path is going to carry them forward into. There will be certain types of jobs where there will have to be a requirement to be able to do certain technical things where the type of diploma they're earning is going to be asked. But there are a lot of jobs where a student will be asked, are you a high school graduate? And they will be able to simply say, I am a high school graduate. We are running a little bit out of time. I can say that the last slide that I was going to be talking about was the future of diploma options in Virginia. Right now it's in flux. We cannot really get a better read right now to say that things are likely to change from what we have now. The goal of the state has been that for kids entering 9th grade in 2022, I believe, we'll be working towards whatever the new diploma options are going to be, which have not yet even been defined. And as we've been talking within the last 6 months, the state is even changing direction about what they're looking at. Some of the big parts of the new diploma option are going to involve assessments, more performance-based assessments rather than traditional SOL tests are likely to be an option. But there is so much yet that's unknown. We can't even really give a lot more detail about what's going to be happening. There was some suggestion to say that there would only be one single state diploma for everyone, no matter what kind of a program they were in. It seems kind of unlikely that that would end up being what's going to happen. There may be an evolution of diploma options to bring something back that's going to be in between a standard diploma and an applied studies diploma. It's too soon to tell. There has not been any discussion to say that that is for sure, although many of the concerns that have been expressed by everyone this evening, I think the state has heard those concerns before, and they should be taken into consideration. I think there's gonna be a lot of time for public comment and work with VDOE as they're preparing the new diploma. We don't know what it's gonna look like, but for the next several years, the advanced studies, standard with accommodations, and applied studies, those are the 4 primary diplomas that are gonna be available for the next several years. If anyone has a student in 8th grade or in high school now, that's what they'll be looking at. Families who have children who are younger, it's still unknown what their diploma options might look like. I wish we had better answers than that. If you have a student who's in 3rd grade, we cannot tell you what the diploma choices are gonna be for your child. Some general suggestions would be that participation in instruction with students, non-disabled peers with supports is usually a more helpful way of going than being in a separate class. The more often a student is in a separate class and for more years, they usually end up having less access to the standard curriculum. So a general rule of thumb would be, where possible, have students with their non-disabled peers to access as much of the full curriculum with appropriate supports as possible. The type of state assessment program in the student's IEP is huge. For example, as was mentioned, if a student is identified to be evaluated with the VAP, we have lots of acronyms. The Virginia Alternative Assessment Program is VAAP. Students who typically are in classes that have functional life skills or MIPA are some of the most common examples of a student who's going to be evaluated with that. Usually, if a student ends up having an IEP meeting, there's nothing that's ever 100%. There are always unique situations, but in almost all situations, if a student's IEP ends up having that as the state assessment plan, it means that the student is working on a curriculum that's significantly different from what their peers are working on. For example, if there's a student in 3rd grade and there's an IEP team decision to place a student on VAP as their state assessment, it means that the student is working on a curriculum that's significantly different from the regular curriculum, and that if the student ends up moving into VAP assessment, it is usually very hard. If that happens for more than a year, it's like, once you go that direction, there's almost no coming back. So I think it's a really important caution that when a student's assessment goes that far away from the traditional
Standards.
assessments, it's very hard to be able to come back from that. Yes.
So basically, if at the 3rd grade, because my son's in 1st and my daughter's in pre-K, so this is applicable for me for sure. So when you're at that juncture, if you will, in 3rd grade, basically if you go back instead of SOLs, you're almost like writing yourself out of the standard diploma option. You're pretty much looking at an applied.
Not 100%, but almost
pretty much,
certainly.
okay, because then
It's
you're starting
very
at that
hard.
young age, diverting so far from the curriculum without an extreme amount of work, they wouldn't be able to do an SOL test and pass it.
And,
That-
and what Christy told us is if you haven't been exposed to the standards curriculum, you can't even elect to take the SOL. Like, even if you just wanted
To
to
see what you would do.
try it.
So, well, I wanna say, thanks to Paul for like saying that, because I think we've heard the exact opposite before. Like, as a committee, like, it's like, no, that is just a temporary thing, you can go back and forth between it as much as you want, and there's, the ABS is replete with examples of children who've done that, and I think we had asked before for like, do we actually have numbers to support that, so I
Well,
think it's encouraging to hear, but.
And then, you know, what Linda had passed, like, at least to me, I mean, I just wanted to kind of put it in perspective. So the 2016 graduating class, like, that's our most recent numbers. There were 189 students who earned a diploma. Of those, 50 earned an advanced diploma, 93 earned a standard diploma, 39 earned the modified standard diploma, and 7 earned the applied studies diploma. So I look at that, and unless we are changing the runway, so to speak, we have 39 kids, or 20%, that need to either like go from basically not taking any SOL to now getting 7 or 9 passed. Is that right? To get a standard? So they've got to reach up to get that, or they're gonna fall back down into the applied studies.
So probably of the 39 who were in the modified standard diploma, if the modified standard diploma was not an option, many of them probably would have exited with an applied studies diploma. It's possible that with a different approach, some of them could have perhaps earned a standard diploma with credit accommodation.
But that's gotta happen like in elementary school, that runway
Right.
going up.
I think that's why I emphasize that if a student ends up accessing curriculum that is significantly different from their peers at their grade level, okay, that is, if that's what a student needs at a particular time, that is what a student needs, but it is something to be very carefully aware of, that if multiple
digging a
years
ditch.
go by where a student is accessing curriculum that is quite different from what their peers are, it's, at a certain point, it's
The gap
very
is
hard
so
to be able
big.
to recover from that, to try to get back into the regular curriculum. But if that's where a student is and what he or she needs, then that may be what it is. But it's something that we should exercise caution.
I think that this is the message that we have to get off to the elementary schools especially, because honestly, I think that they don't really think about anything beyond 5th grade. Like, that's their direction, so the conversation that happens in 3rd grade should be very clear that this is the very last resort, and you have to do everything you can, even if they're getting like D's, like just push them in this direction so that they have a chance of getting that diploma.
That's why I opened the discussion with saying that high school graduation is not just about what a student did in 12th grade or what they did in 11th grade. It's an accumulation of all of the years of learning and preparation. And students taking certain courses or certain junctures where they go left or right and have all of us know from life experiences, if we took a road over here, we're gonna end up in a different place. If we take a road over here, we're gonna end up in a different place. And graduation and the diploma that the student ends up with is an accumulation of many years of work and learning and growing, not just what happens in senior year or what is in high school. All of the grades go into making up the student to get to their outcome.
And I would have to say that that sounds like the best argument that I've heard for adjusting the MIPA program, if not some of the other, specialized classroom programs where you have, in the best case scenario, a 3-grade range, and in the worst case scenario, a 5-grade range of kids in one classroom that can possibly be accessing the curriculum that is most appropriate for them because a teacher and an aide are trying to spread across the grade levels. So,
Something to think about.
yes.